Well, welcome to the podcast. Yes, we've got another great guest from around the world. We've got Mr. Sean Castrina. Yes, he is from Virginia in the USA. He's known as the 10-minute entrepreneur. He's done many podcasts. He specializes in helping people and talking about startup of business, which over the last 3 years, people have really got into this and have seen the opportunities around, but not everyone has done it right. Welcome to the show, Sean. How are you?
It's great to be on the show.
Mate, you live in Virginia, over not far from Washington. Have you always been there, or did you grow up somewhere else?
I grew up north of it, in Maryland area, but I went to college in Virginia. So yeah, I've been in Virginia probably the last 37 years. So a good bit of my time has been here in Central Virginia.
So, were you one of the kids at school, one of the nerdy ones that loved math and loved economics and sat there and
No, I was a Division I athlete. So I was an average student, but a very good athlete.
well, pretty much the same skill set when it comes to being in business?
It is 100% the right skill set. Tenacious, competitive. Uh, you know the value of a team. Yeah, all that's, you're resilient. It's all the qualities I think that make you a great athlete generally carry over very well to entrepreneurship.
What was your fondest memory of when you were doing your study?
Being the athletic part of it. I could, I
That's
have some
cool.
great, I got some great soccer moments scoring, playing I was a forward and, scoring against a lot of great teams. And then I was a Division I wrestler.
Hmm.
And so that I was a high school state champion, so I did real well there. And then I played tennis. So I liked very different sports, but
Yeah.
yeah, I like sports because they teach you to stick with something, suck it up, don't quit. And winning is worth the effort. I always tell my son that. I said, winning is always worth it.
It's funny.
It's always worth the sacrifice.
It's funny when I talk to a lot of successful entrepreneurs and successful business people about their study. I said, what was more important, study or social? And to a T, the most successful said social.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
they all do it.
nobody's ever asked me my GPA
No,
since I'm in, I'm a middle-aged man. I've never had anybody ask me what my GPA was in high school or what my GPA was in college. And I've had
and
less than 5 people ask me what school I graduated from. I've had less than 3 people in my whole life ask me what was my degree.
hmm, look, you look at Richard Branson, you look at some of the top business people around the world, even in every country. I know in Australia, especially, most of them didn't even finish high school. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
and
just once they
and
get an
as for
idea, they run with
university,
it.
they lasted 6 months.
They get bored easy.
So what was the moment where you decided you were very good at sport, you were very good at the social, but now you talk and you train people about business? That's what happened. What was the light bulb moment that you went, oh shivers, I need to do
Yeah.
something else here?
Yeah. Well, I had my dream job in my early 20s and I thought I'd be there forever and just work my way up and be a CEO.
Yeah.
And there was a change in leadership and we were all let go. And I realized then that there's no job guarantees. That the idea that you're going to work somewhere for 20 or 30 years, in my brain, it sounded really good. But once I lost that job, at that point I had I knew then that I would do something that was on my own. I wasn't quite sure what it would be, but
Yeah.
I definitely knew that I was going to do something that I could. And I always say, like, if I'm on the Titanic, I at least want to try to steer it away from the iceberg. Like, just let me at least have let me get onto that wheel. I don't want to be in the back of the boat. So from that point on, I knew I'd want to start companies, and that's pretty much what I've done for the last 35, 30 years.
We'll get on to starting companies and the mistakes and the good things people make. People quite often in podcasts concentrate on what's the three or four biggest mistakes, but there's always a lot of stuff that people do right. Where did the weekend MBA thought come from?
It was fun, about a year ago. I was texting with Brad Lee, who's big in the United States, and we were just talking about how a lot of the business conferences don't really give you stuff that you can actually, it's all motivation, it's all hype, or
Mm,
it's all sales. And we're just talking about how, there needs to be some type of event where you actually learn the granular stuff, or learn what a P&L statement looks like, and understand that, learn what a business plan looks like, learn how to, should you franchise your company? Should you partner with other people? Just try to really look at maybe 12 to 16 subjects and look at it far more deep. And so I really got passionate about that idea of doing something like that. And, we'll be doing that again this year, April 28th and 29th. And it's just the idea of having a weekend where you learn from true entrepreneurs on what you may not be, what you may be missing, what there typically there's something that you don't know that's keeping you from going to the next level, or there, you kind of got it, but you're kind of missing that one, that one little something. Maybe you should franchise your company, maybe you need a partnership, maybe you need, why isn't it scaling? All that stuff. So we try to bring in some of the best people and have them share their experience on how to do it. And it was a tremendous success last year, and I'm sure this year it'll be great as well.
Look, I couldn't agree more. I was actually at a conference 3 weeks ago in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, and every person they had on stage was a business owner who earns over $1 million in their pocket.
Yeah.
And
well, you can
they
learn
all had a
from
different
that.
message. And I took away 4 pages of notes, but I didn't write down everything they said. As the facilitator said, listen to what they say and see what works for you. And one of the most successful guys, people said to him, what's the average tenure for the sales staff in your business? And everyone knows sales staff do turn over quite a bit. He said 13 years.
That's incredible.
And they said, and what about the average sales, as in commission, base plus commission? They all earn more than him. And people looked, and he said, and I'm incredibly happy about that. He said, because that means my business model works. My staff are happy. And it shocked a lot of people, but it was a good shock. So you're so right. I mean, I got a lot out of that weekend. But all different people.
Whenever you can be around people who are doing it and have done it,
and
that are actively in the grind. Yeah, it's a great opportunity.
And the best thing about this was, and you would know this too by doing your weekend MBA, they all walked off stage and during the breaks were there to talk to. They weren't selling books. They weren't selling anything.
Yeah, we don't let anybody sell anything.
Question.
Yeah, we don't let anybody sell anything. Yeah, you're there to learn, and try to make yourself available, to the audience and bring value and try to change their lives. And I mean, that's the goal. See if, what you have, one piece of advice, you can share one piece of advice, and it might be that missing ingredient that, somebody in the audience has, and it takes their business to a whole different level.
So you're a serial entrepreneur. Was it only early on when you started businesses that they didn't work, or have you had the odd bump in the road along the way?
Oh yeah. In the beginning, I thought I couldn't fail. Like my first few did really well. And then I started, hubris takes over, your cockiness, your arrogance, and you think you can start any business.
Yes.
And we generally all have a lane. We always have something, a core competency or a formula that works for us. And it may be able to, span a couple industries, but we can't typically do A and Z. They're too far apart. And it's only when I tried to do Z, something that I didn't understand at all, was completely out of my competency, completely had no synergy with any of the companies I currently owned. Yeah, they were the ones that failed. And now I know I have kind of a formula going forward. There has to be synergy with existing companies I have. Peter can't rob from Paul. So I can't take money from a good company to fund a bad company. The new company has to stand on its own 2 feet. That's typically what we do when we're entrepreneurs. We siphon money off from something that's working to something that's not, because we hang on too long to the one that's not, because we don't want to take the loss. We don't want to take that failure. And I've learned, if I can't get a business going within 90 days, I either need a massive pivot quickly, or it's done. I don't have the patience for it, because it's my money. I don't have anybody backing my businesses. So, I don't want to go a year. I don't need a year to know it's bad.
Yeah. I watched, there's a show that came out of America where they put 3 millionaires in a town and they get 90 days to make $1 million business. and they're all. I knew one of the three, and they all had three different approaches. But they all said the same thing. In 90 days, you know if that business is going to work or not. That's why they say 90
Absolutely.
days.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. To me, every business I've ever had, I knew early on whether it would succeed. The ones that failed, I pretty much knew early on. And by 90 days, I was just trying to figure out how to dump it.
If you looked at your first 10 years of being an entrepreneur, what's the biggest mistake you made, as in decision? And what's the other way, decision you made that wasn't a mistake that absolutely rocked?
I think in the beginning is, oh gosh, probably trying to do too many businesses at once in the
Yep.
beginning instead of just drilling down, focusing on one and really scaling it to maybe the next level. I had many things that were working, but I'm curious if I'd have put all my focus on one, where I could have taken it to. So I think sometimes we chase too many shiny objects.
Yeah.
So I think early on that was probably, one of my weaknesses.
And what about on the good side? What's something you did that really surprised you and
I think,
kicked that goal, as we say, being a sports
yeah,
person?
yeah. I mean, I've had a few that have really exceeded. I had a magazine that was in 21 cities. I started a construction company that is just an absolute conglomerate that does extraordinarily well. I started it as a handyman company only because I couldn't get anybody I tried to do a project at my house and I couldn't get anybody to do it. And it drove me crazy. And I don't know the difference between two screwdrivers. I mean, I don't know anything about it. And I'm like, this is crazy. And so I started a handyman company that ended up turning into a multi-million-dollar company. And then we just kept adding on and adding on. Never saw that coming. And then, and then about 3 years ago, I started a digital marketing company because I wanted to have it to handle the marketing for my existing companies. I wanted to have an in-house digital marketing company. So, and then that has well exceeded. We're getting ready to franchise it. And that business will, end up being, an 8-9 figure business. So I never saw that coming either. So the ones that really did great, I didn't think they had the top end that they do. So I've been fairly surprised over the years.
You spoke early on about you've got a set formula. The one thing that COVID's done, apart from the obvious health issues, was it's opened up massive business opportunities for people who actually opened their eyes and saw. And I was speaking to the CEO of one of Australia's largest charities, and COVID was a good thing. And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It forced us to pivot. It forced us to look at new ways to raise money, made us a lot leaner, and they've actually come out of it exponentially massive with the amount of money they're now raising. And they're doing it so much easier and so much smarter, as we call it. With business people now, especially with entrepreneurs, if someone's sitting in front of you, they've got their business idea, they're passionate about it, it's something they love. Looking back now with all your experience, what do you say to them? What is the best thing we can say to people when they're about to start up their first entrepreneur, their first business? This is what you need to do, mate, as we would say in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing, you need to test the idea. Just because you have an idea does not mean it is a good idea. So
Yep.
get it out of your head and bounce it around some smart people. Try to beta test it if you can, however you can test it. I always say, test the soup before you serve it. Because
Like a
there's no
chef.
guarantee. Yeah, you really need to do that. So I think the biggest thing is you want to make sure that there's a wanting audience. The number one thing I tell you,
Yeah.
make sure there is a wanting audience for what you have. Make sure that you have a message, test it, that people want to hear it. So if you don't have a wanting audience and you don't know how to speak their language, you don't know how to attract that customer, I don't care what you're selling, it's not going to work. So the big thing I tell people is that, okay, who is it that's going to be buying what it is? What is going to be how are you going to sell it to them? What's going to be your value proposition that makes them buy from you as opposed to company B? And what are you going to do, that makes you, dramatically different than them, or, makes them want to buy from you? I think the biggest problem is we just launch businesses and they're just so average that there's nothing great about it. It's a business that offers something that 9 other businesses do, but there's nothing that makes them stand out. And I think you have to say, you need, I said this, what promise could you make that if your target customer heard it and knew you could deliver on it, they would chase you down for your business? Chase you down for your business. That's how you start a business. You want to have a value proposition that is so good that they can't say no to you. That if they tell their friends call you. That you want to have that kind of value proposition. I ordered a Rolex. It's the example. I ordered 2 Rolexes actually. One for my son and one for me. One for my son as a gift because he helped me with the weekend MBA. I ordered that thing almost a year ago. So they call me like a week ago and say, you know, Sean, we don't know when it's coming. Do you want your deposit back or you want to wait? I said, no, I'll wait. Why? Because it's a Rolex.
Yeah.
Right? It's a Rolex. That's why.
Yeah.
Now, would I wait for a Timex? Would I wait for, a Citizen? Would I wait for an Apple Watch? Would I wait? There is not a lot of watches that I would let anybody hold the deposit that they're holding because it's a Rolex. So you need to have something that's so big, so good, solves such a problem, so needed that people will chase you down for your business. And then you need to figure out how to communicate that value proposition in the way that I'm saying it in such a way that like, they can do that. They can do that. That product's that good. I got to buy it.
Do you think a lot of the startups see confused value proposition with price? They think by giving something at a cheaper price, they're giving people better value, which to me
that's the dumbest thing possible. When have you ever bought something that was cheap and thought it was better than something that was expensive in your whole life? Seriously, just ever. When you buy a $5 sandwich in America and you buy a $15, sandwich, there's a difference between the two. Okay. There's a reason why there's premium gas and not premium gas. I'll tell you this. I have very nice cars. There is a big difference when I close the door of my BMW and I close the door of the company Kia. There's a reason why there's a $60,000 difference in the price of those vehicles. So, you can decide if you want to service the lowest end. Well, that's okay, but you better service a lot of them. You better sell something that you can sell in absolute masses, such volume, because it's hard to win when you're at the bottom price wise. You better win in volume then.
We did a survey at work the other day, and I asked people about real estate agents. I said, how do you pick one? And they all said the car they drive. And I said, what do you mean? They said, if they're driving a nice car, they're not driving, and this isn't anything against Kia.
Yeah.
But if they're driving a Kia, a Hyundai, or they're driving a BMW, a Mercedes, a Lexus, doesn't matter the age of the car, I will go with them because they're successful.
And it does work. Like I said, I own a construction company. I don't drive pickup trucks or anything even close to that. I drive a black Mercedes AMG. And my clients look at me and I always say to them, I said, if you sue me, you get something. And they laugh and they think about it and they're like, yeah, I mean, he must be doing pretty well. He's driving, a very nice vehicle, but it's true. I mean, I joke with my clients. I go, do you really want to do business with someone who's broke?
True.
I mean, how good is their business if they're broke? Do you really want to give them $100,000 deposit check on a job? If they're struggling financially, they can't manage their own finances. I go, come on. And I know that. So that's why I have really top tier clients. I think the race to the bottom doesn't work.
Yeah. I saw a interview between 2 very successful real estate agents the other week, and they were giving each other a bit of lip, as we say in Australia. And one was bragging about the car he had. And the other one said, well, this is mine. Well, this is yours. This is mine. This is yours. And the agent who ran with just as successful as him, with a much smaller team, just turned around to him and said, but I own mine.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Then there's a difference here.
and you could see that. I mean, these were 2 good mates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it blew him away.
Yeah.
But there was a lesson around business for that. He didn't update his roles all the time, because once he got to own it, he just kept it.
Oh, and I agree with that. I joke with my wife, like the AMG we have. I go, I can't see any reason why I have 2 really nice cars. And I was saying to her, I said, I can't imagine a reason I would get rid of them within 10 years.
No.
I mean, the AMG, like, it is gorgeous. It's beautiful. I said, I can't imagine getting rid of it within 10 years. And then I have the M4 BMW hardtop. I'm like,
Mm.
every time I get in it, it's almost 5 years old. I'm like, I'm shocked. It still feels like the day I bought it. Yeah.
I've
Now,
got a 3 Series, so I know what you're saying.
when you typically do well financially, there is a frugal side of you.
Oh yeah, look,
It's
we
it's
bought
it's
ours, and this is
ones. Yeah, it's the young
when it
ones that spend all their money.
100%. When it comes to business, people also got to reward themselves. When we got to a certain stage in our life, we went and bought a BMW,
Yeah,
and we didn't buy it until we were at a certain stage. A lot
exactly.
of business people I see don't reward their own success. They put
Well,
the
the
words,
idea of this,
yeah,
yeah, I don't buy into I mean, there's this minimalist mentality to some degree.
yeah,
Be, I I have nice vehicles, and I have found that when I interview employees and they see my car out there, they know their paycheck is good. I can't
yes,
tell you how many of them have said to me, because in construction, the idea is you might get ripped off, you won't get paid. Well, when they come to our office, which I own, and the digital marketing, I own the office
mm,
there too. And even when I started the digital marketing company, they're like, well, we saw what you drove, so we kind of knew you were doing well. Listen to me, people are going to look at what you've done, and there's nothing wrong with I have a really nice house as well, but again, I put away 10% of my income for over 30 years
yeah.
away. And so there's money I never touch for any reason. And I buy the business, the dirt underneath my companies. So I do things like that. So I mean, I like nice things, but I have financial principles that I follow, and putting away 10% and never touching it and owning the ground underneath my personal house and my companies is one of them as well.
You've mentioned this a couple of times, image. Now, when I've taken some people, and I took a business owner, and we were standing on the other side of the counter to use the terminology, and he was saying how good he is and da 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 da. But he said, he had a problem in this area and that. I said, that's good. He said, what do you mean? I said, let's go to the outside of the building. And he said, what do you mean? He said, let's go outside and have a look. What does someone see when they walk up? Now, image is the building where your office is. It's your website.
Absolutely.
It's your logo. It's everything to do. And I said, let's stand and have a look. And I said, now pretend you're a customer. Would you buy from you? And
I
I got
so agree.
silence. My question is, how important is it when someone is starting up to get professional help around your logo, your image, and your branding?
Yeah, I think initially you want to have your brand reflect what would be attractive to your target customer. Example, if your target customer is over 40, then don't come out with like a cartoon cutesy type of logo. So I always say, know who your target customer is as best you can understand it
Mm,
early on, and build everything around what they want to buy, the type of person they want to buy from.
mm,
So again, figure out your target customer. That's the person that's most likely to buy from you, and then build your brand around attracting that target customer. If you've ever watched a golf tournament or a tennis tournament, there are, people that advertise on those are a lot different than the ones who advertise in NASCAR, here
mm,
in America. It's different. Or horse racing. I mean, it's a different, it's a different consumer. So I think your brand is important. And I think if you just need to look, again, I'm not saying, everybody has a different image that they want, and that's completely
mm.
up to you. But know who your target customer is. Example, if I'm selling barbecue here in the United States, well, that's a different target customer than if I'm selling steak. There's nothing wrong with either one of those, but it's a different brand position. It's a different brand image.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, you can
yeah,
sell the
so
same product to two different areas, just with a different packaging.
absolutely. So I think it is. I think our tendency is that we what happens is 5 and 10 years into owning a business, we need to open our eyes and look, and everything looks like crap. The building's not any better. We haven't updated anything. Our staff's wearing old, worn out
Mm,
shirts, with logos on them. I mean, I think you always have to say, are you would you buy, like you said, would you buy from you? You're always trying to keep your image looking professional and fitting the price point that you're trying to get. If you look, old and cheap and all that, you're going to probably get you're going to receive that kind of compensation for your products and or services.
Yeah, that's true. What you do put out there is what you receive, and it's never so truer than in business. Now we've seemed to, with a bit of God willing, come out the other side of COVID and go on to whatever the new norm will be. We don't really know that yet. It has turned the digital space upside down. It's turned the office space upside down. We're still working on the balance there. Where do you see is going to be the biggest challenges for new entrepreneurs in the next 5 to 10 years when they're starting a business?
I mean, clearly, I think you always have to start a business now, knowing that something like that could happen, pandemic wise. I mean, I think you have to. So you need to bake that into the cake of how restaurants would do business. I mean, restaurants that can't do delivery, carry out, and things of that nature. I mean, to me, that would be extremely foolish. I think you have to just have a workplace where, I mean, I would have a workplace that's kind of a hybrid. Like if I wouldn't have people in there probably 5 days a week, I would, even if it was just 4 days in and 1 day, just because if it happened, we're positioned to work from home.
True.
So I think the biggest thing is that you've seen the writing on the wall. So of course it could happen. And if you're not right, and will, so position yourself for that, knowing that. And that means also, putting money away in cash reserves, because you realize that, things can get shut down. I mean, that's the reality of it. And if you're 2 weeks away from going under, you're not going to survive.
So anyone who's still watching this online with YouTube and that, they'll see behind you the 10-minute entrepreneur. What's that about?
That's my podcast. That is a top podcast in the world in entrepreneurship and marketing. So
yep.
I'm one of them where I don't have a great deal of patience. So my business partners, I always speak quickly and to the point. And so they came up with this idea. They go, you should just do it on a podcast so we could just listen to it.
Yeah.
That way we didn't even have to come into the office. You could just kind of do it on a podcast. And so 4 years ago, I started the 10-minute entrepreneur podcast based on just dropping quick nuggets to my business partners.
Yeah.
And then it kind of took a life of its own. And so if you like to learn something about business in a very shorter, quick format, 10 to 20 minutes, that's definitely the 10-minute entrepreneur podcast.
If I could put you in a bar in Washington and give you 2 entrepreneurs in the world you've never met, who would you going to sit with?
Oh, I mean, Elon Musk definitely blows me away. And then you got to love Jeff Bezos. I mean, you couldn't go wrong with either of those. I mean, I could go on and on, I think if I could have, I'd love to have lunch with like Warren Buffett, I mean, because he's an entrepreneur in just a different way, because he just buys companies. I love what he looks for in companies and things like that. But yeah, how you couldn't go wrong with Elon. You couldn't go wrong with Richard Branson. There's I can think about 4 or 5 that I would love. I don't put any of them any kind of high. They're all just amazing, amazing to me.
So last 2 questions. What's the biggest message you want to say to someone who is listening to the podcast and is thinking of starting their first business?
Entrepreneurship is great, but it's not for everybody. And it's okay if you're not an entrepreneur. My daughter's a 3rd grade school teacher. Okay. My son's an entrepreneur. Love both of them equally, obviously. So, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a little bit of higher tolerance for risk. You like to control things. You're a little bit of a control freak. Typically you're a good salesperson, communicator, a little bit of high energy, a little bit of hype type of person. I'm saying the good ones.
Yeah.
The good ones have that. I'd say, if that's you and you've got a good idea, something that people want, hey, try it. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work and you figure it out, and maybe your second one does well, or you become, or you one day you end up as an employee. There's no wrong answer, but I always say, just do it. You'll probably regret what you didn't do more than what you did do. So just go out there and do it, but it doesn't mean you have to go all in. I always tell people, think like a pup tent in America. This is like a 3-pole tent that can barely handle like a little rainstorm. Your business does not have to be a dream house initially. It just needs enough to get off the ground to see if it works, so that, you start pivoting quickly. You start going, okay, that's working, that's not working. So you don't have to, get a big home equity line of credit, or, I don't know how it is in other countries, but you do it for the least amount of money possible. for that to get it off the ground. Remember how I said you'll know in 90 days? If it's working, the business will allow you to bootstrap it to the next level.
Yeah, awesome. Look, some of the stuff you said today is fantastic. I mean, if anyone is they're in business and they're looking at relaunching, they should be getting in contact with you. Where do people find you, Sean?
SeanCastrina.com. They can get my book, The 8 Unbreakable Rules for Business Startup Success. It's free at SeanCastrina.com. You'll also be notified of the Weekend MBA, and I'm on Instagram at Sean.Castrina, and I'm always dropping good information there. So either of those, and the 10-Minute Entrepreneur Podcast. So you got my website for a free book, Instagram, and or the 10-Minute Entrepreneur Podcast.
Mate, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. I love people who walk the walk, talk the talk. You've been there, you've done it. You're not someone who's just making it up and reading off a screen. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for spending your time today on the podcast. And as we say at the end of every one of our podcasts, have a groovy day.